This comment says, can you teach a dog to engage in flight? Engage, disengage has been great for lowering threshold, and when he's at threshold, across threshold, he thinks bluffing is the best option. This is an excellent question, and the answer is yes. Actually, teaching dogs to flight is one of the main staples of what I do in behavior therapy, and it's one of the first things we need to learn. Before we start working with a dog's triggers, it's vitally important that they know how to get away from them. A dog who perceives that they can engage in flight successfully will choose that over the fight option. The trick here is that it's all about perception. So if the dog doesn't perceive that they can get away, then they may resort to a fight option instead. And perception is in the eye of the beholder. When dogs are on leash, when they're inside, when they're enclosed, they may feel, perhaps rightly so, that they can't get away. And some dogs, that limit might be very, very big. They might feel that if the trigger's within 100 yards of them, that they can no longer get away safely and need to engage in fight. So we're often working to lower that threshold. And one of the ways to do that is to show them successfully how to get away from the trigger within a context that they feel safe. So they're in the green zone, they feel safe and secure. That's the best place for them to learn. And then we empower them through that practice. Part of this can be us understanding the dog's body language and noticing when they start to get uncomfortable, not when they start to growl and lunge and bark. I mean, definitely at that point, also get them away, help them flight. But at that point, we are past the point where we ideally would move away. We want to look for the subtle discomfort, the avoidance, the averting the eyes, the turning away, the ducking the head, the pausing and not moving forward on the walk, the lip licking, the yawning, the displacement behaviors. When we see that, we can help the dog move away. And doing that consistently can really help cut down on that fight option. Now, some dogs are escalating straight from green to red, and that is really, really hard as well. And that is a different piece to address, but it is addressable. But for the dogs that are giving warning signs, we need to be moving away way back there. One of the first exercises that I teach my clients is a flight cue. I like to use the cue run, but you can also use a cue like let's go. And this is a cue that we are practicing when there are no triggers around first. We are getting the dog really familiar that when you say, Fluffy, run, you guys are going to take off running together. And a lot of dogs love this. It feels like a game. And they'll take off running with you. At the end of the flight cue, and you can run a few feet, a few yards. If you have a dog who arouses easily and struggles to come back down, you're going to want to watch that when you're playing, you're not running super fast in a super aroused state for a very long distance, because then they're going to come up too much and out of that learning brain. And so for my dysregulated kiddos, that is something that we have to watch for. And this is also adaptable to human ability. So you can be sprinting, as long as that's not too arousing to the dog, but you can also just be walking purposefully in another direction. You can be jogging, anything in between. And then when you reach the end, do a calming exercise. And so that could be a scatter feed of treats. Or it could be a licking treat that you hold, if possible, at a position where they're lowering their head beneath their body, because lowering the head beneath the body is going to help lower the heart rate. Licking and chewing, activating the digestive system, sniffing, seeking, all of these are activities that will bring their stress levels down. And when we're just doing this for practice, we've only increased stress levels through running. And so we're having some positive emotions, and then we're practicing coming back down. You're also building self-regulation. I like to play this as an on-off switch game in these moments where you are carefully increasing the arousal, the challenge, and matching that with the dog's ability to calm and making that harder. So increasing the distance or intensity of your run as they're successful at calming, and decreasing that if they're struggling. And we have a whole collection of videos on off switch games. They are definitely something that I recommend for almost all of my clients, for dogs who struggle to self-regulate. And so I often have clients practice their flight cue as an on-off switch game, so you're getting even more bang for your buck. You can then start practicing this flight cue literally along flight paths that you want them to take. So if your dog is often reacting at a certain side of the fence or the alley or, from the garage, you can go to that trigger point where they're often reacting when there are no triggers there and practice your cue back to safety. So you walk up to the sidewalk and then Fluffy run, and you run to your front door. Or you go up to that side of the fence and then Fluffy run, and you run to the back door. And now they're actually practicing flighting from that area of concern back to safety. This is incredibly empowering for the dog. Aggression is about wanting more space. That fight response is about wanting more space. Even if it is born out of excitement or frustration, by the time we get up to that point, the dog is overstimulated. We're in a fight response. The dog needs more space. And so empowering that, teaching them how to get that, and letting them know that even if they're on leash, you're going to see their body language, and when they need you to initiate that is incredibly empowering, and it provides our dogs with agency, that belief that they have control over their environment, and that is linked to improved resilience to stress, which is another huge piece that we want to work on. And then, of course, this flight cue can also be really helpful as management. So when there is a trigger and you see that the dog, ideally at those lower levels of stress, you're inviting them to move away. You're doing that fluffy let's go. You're running together. If the dog is not coming with you, you still need to move them away in those situations to prevent them from going into that red zone, having that fight response. You might shorten up your leash there. You can use treats to try to lure, but it is imperative to get away from that trigger. If the scary thing is coming at them and they are preparing for that fight response, we need to move. And that is not going to be less aversive or more aversive than actually going into that survival response. I do also want to touch a little bit on the second part of the comment, which is that engage, disengage has been great for lowering threshold and when he's at threshold. And I think there are a couple ways we can play engage, disengage. One is within a training setup where the dog should be nowhere close to threshold. They should be solidly in the green zone, feeling good. We should be fostering curiosity. And we should see them able to get closer because they are curious, and that curiosity is replacing fear. Sometimes we also, I think this is more within the context that the commenter is talking about, use it as management. So we are in a situation that we don't want to be in. Maybe flight is not an option, and so we're trying to use engage, disengage to get through. But that engage, disengage should not be a replacement for flight if the dog is approaching threshold. They're going to go over threshold. That dog needs to get out of there because we can't convince a dog that they are safe with treats. We can try to get them through a stressful situation. We can create associations between, that trigger equals treat, but we have to do that when the dog is in a thinking brain and when they already feel safe and secure, because you can't eat pizza while you're being chased by a lion. And so we can absolutely use engage, disengage to keep the dog eating, to offer some predictability, to offer some predictable connection, to offer them what might feel like a bit of agency. They can create something predictable happening in the environment as we get through a tough situation. But in those moments, if flight is an option, that's what we need to be choosing.